Excited today to have Lanier Ward with us. Lanier is one of the pastors at Triangle Community Church in Apex, North Carolina, where I used to work there and alongside of him. We've known each other for about 12 years there. I still kind of remember when you came in. Nate, one of our interns, had brought you in after we'd kind of already got to know you a little bit from the summer there at Lookup at our summer camp. So you kind of were our counselor, and then all of a sudden you had a connection and came in. I remember that time there. What were you thinking when that first kind of happened? You came into this church and drove 30 minutes or so and came in.
Yeah, it was odd because I didn't grow up going to church much. We were creasters plus a little bit maybe. And so coming in, it was just an odd thing. I didn't go to church at all my freshman year. I actually came to know Christ towards the end of my freshman year through Nate. And then immediately kind of worked at a summer camp. It's just a weird way of God working. And at the camp was TCC's summer staffer. And so I got to know Kevin and some of the kids. And so my first week back at UNC, Nathan was my roommate and said, "Hey, I'm interning at TCC. You want to come along and hang out?" It's like, well, yeah, might as well. And 12 years later.
Mm-hmm. And that progressed interesting enough because you started there, you just kind of were coming and helping out. Then you came on as an intern and then went to part-time, and then you went full-time. And then even when I stepped out of a role, you kind of took over even a bigger role. And it was in the process there. You even lived with my family for about 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if this or not, but my son David now is the same age you were when you were living with us.
Oh gosh, don't start that. That's scary. Yeah, a weird course of events. I was playing ultimate frisbee on a TCC mission trip that summer. We were doing a really cool thing actually, where we did half the week in Apex and half the week at another former intern's church out in Western North Carolina. And the first night of the mission trip, we were playing ultimate frisbee, and the other youth pastor stepped on my foot and broke my foot in a couple places. And I was supposed to be moving out of my apartment that week anyways, and had broken my foot, couldn't drive, couldn't do anything. And so Kevin and Becca graciously said, "Hey, come stay with us for a couple days while you're figuring it out." And a couple days turned into a couple years pretty quickly there.
But I tell you, my boy still like he's an older brother, and it's just been it was a great experience for all. It kind of helped us as a church, allowing you to continue to be a part of what we were doing, and helped you out too as well in that situation. So it was a really good time. Now you're married and have an almost 2-year-old. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your family and kind of how you're managing this upside down world we're in right now?
Yeah. So my wife Anna is from Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is another place that Kevin, you spent a lot of times, where you grew up and were in ministry for a long time. And she's another Lookup person, so another person kind of in that world as well. So just a ton of overlapping friends and people in common. Ann and I have been married for almost 8 years now, which is another, just doesn't seem possible. I feel like that was just yesterday, but we've been married for about 8 years, and Eli is going to be 2 in July, and that's our first. We love him to death. He's made life quite the adventure, especially when you can't go outside. Anna is a child life specialist, which is kind of a newer position that a lot of hospitals don't have yet. But her role is when a minor comes into the hospital, she's there to help them feel safe and comfortable, and to kind of be the liaison between the hospital and the family to make sure that everyone's understanding the procedures, understanding what's happening. It allows the doctors to, not in a bad way, but not have to do a ton of bedside manner with the families, because in an ER they're just so busy running place to place, and wait times get crazy. And so instead of the doctor having to sit with a family for 20-30 minutes and explain, Anna can kind of follow up with the family and make sure everybody's comfortable with what's happening. Everybody feels safe. She's great at what she does. She's been doing that for about 6 years, and it's actually been interesting. They're actually really, really slow with all the coronavirus stuff going on. The hospital overall is busy, but the children's wing, they're not allowing anybody, even minors, in the children's wing that has any kind of respiratory symptoms or a fever. they've, like many hospitals, they've got the tent set up outside where they're doing screenings, and anybody that shows symptoms immediately gets, kind of like your experience, Kevin, they either get told, you know, go home and quarantine, and if it gets worse, you can come back, but we can't do anything for you right now. Or, if it is bad, they just take them straight to the adult side for quarantine. So they're like seeing, I think, 40% of the normal patient count right now on the children's side. So it's been
Has your
pretty slow.
shifted much at all in this, just during the season, or hours shifted or anything, or just less people coming in?
No, nothing's changed there yet. Um, Wake Med, which is the county hospital where she works, has promised all employees, no one's going to lose a job, even if patient volume goes down some. So nothing's changed there yet. It's definitely slower. So she's kind of been playing catch up on some paperwork and some administrative kind of stuff. But she still works part-time. She's 2 12-hour shifts a week. It's just been slower for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I know it's just a crazy season. You kind of mentioned even having a 2-year-old. I know I've heard from quite a few people that this season has been very difficult and trying for a lot of families trying to manage, young kids here all the time, as well as even kids that are maybe a little older that they're trying to do school and work and life all in the same place, all in the same space. And it's challenging for you guys. And so when Anna goes to work, you're typically, I guess, we would be working from home that day, or at home with Eli.
So the way we're doing it, our senior pastor's wife actually still comes over. She comes on Tuesdays and takes him for most of the day while Anna's at work, and then I get him for the evening. And then on Fridays, that's my day off. So that's the other day Anna works. So we've got it pretty easy on the schedule front. We've been really blessed to have, church hours can be long and crazy, but there's also a lot of flexibility typically. So that's been a really nice thing to be able to kind of flip my off day to match her on days so that we don't have to get a second day of childcare, which has been really helpful. But no, we've never viewed sunny, warm days as a blessing as much as we have in this season, when we can actually get outside. And, we'll, on warm days, we'll spend 4+ hours outside with him, just letting him run around and play. And we've got the little mini pool we can fill up. We've got the water table, and the wet days, which there's been a lot of. I think you guys are having the same thing up there. The wet days, you're watching the clock a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're like, okay, can I make it to nap time? And then when he gets to nap time, it's like, all right, now I got some time. And then when he wakes up, it's like, okay, can I make it to dinner time? And you just kind of break up the days into smaller parts. With a 2-year-old, nothing changed schedule wise. We feel the impact less than parents of school age kids for sure. It's not like we had to transition anything for him learning. He's kind of doing the same old. So I definitely don't envy the parents of school age kids who have now had to try to figure out working from home and their kids going to school at home. And yeah, that's a whole different animal.
Yeah. And so as you're kind of going through this, excuse me, as you're going through this time and season, I know your role at the church. What do you typically what's your role at the church you're working on?
So I'm the student ministries pastor, and that started to kind of take on some overseeing all the family ministries role as well. Kind of trying to unite one cohesive plan all the way from birth through college, really. And so we've got a middle school youth pastor. We've got directors for each of our elementary and preschool hallways. So we're kind of trying to become a little bit of a more united team. We're on the orange strategy, which I know, Kevin, you're familiar with, and they do great stuff, helping us, stand alongside parents, which probably has never been more important than it is right now, trying to partner well with parents. And so I do the student ministries. I'm the alternate worship leader at times. That used to be a big part of my job. That was actually kind of why I came on staff here way back in the day, was to kind of eventually be a worship leader. But paths shifted and things changed, and so now that's become a fairly small part of the job. I miss it sometimes, but love ministering to students. Love the opportunities there. I did not have a plan for navigating youth ministry in a pandemic ready to go, so it's been
really, that's surprising.
Yeah, somehow that never came up to have that plan ready. So
Have you seen some people, like, what are some of the obstacles you think you've seen for parents of students or kids trying to navigate the spiritual side of content in their lives and stuff? What obstacles you seen, or how have you guys tried to address that?
Yeah, I think so. Wake County, which is where we are, they just started back to classes last week online. And so now we're fighting the battle that students are already spending at minimum 4, for a lot of them, more like 6 or 7 hours in front of a Zoom call, working either with teachers or collaborating with other students. And that's really our only way to get content out to them. So asking them to do a second activity like that is a big ask. And so we saw a pretty immediate downturn in engagement after they started back to school, just because it was like, I'm sitting still in front of a laptop 6 hours a day already. That's the last thing I want to do a second time. So we don't have much choice on how to get content out right now. What we've been trying to do is send parents good resources. We follow a lot of Orange has some bloggers that put out some great stuff. The Fuller Youth Institute is one that I love, and Kara Powell and some of the folks out there put out some great content on how to walk alongside parents during this. So we've tried to basically be a library of resources and be a source of encouragement for parents and students alike. Because it's a new season for all of us. I don't know how to pastor in a pandemic. They don't know how to parent in a pandemic.
Mhm.
Kids don't know how to be students in a pandemic. We're all figuring it out together a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And that has been a challenge. And for so many parents, I mean, it's now this weight of responsibility of spiritually encouraging your kids without the full resources that you felt like you had with the churches now. So it's actually saying, what do we do in this? And right now I'm just trying to manage my home. I'm just trying to, marriages are testing limits because now everybody's in the same place. And maybe there's loss of jobs or some financial strain on top of it, as well as everything else, and sickness going around. So there's a lot of extra strain. So in all of this season, what would maybe be some encouragement that you want to give people during this season that might be helpful or encouraging to them?
Yeah, I think one encouragement that I'd give, and maybe more of an exhortation on this side, would be patient and gracious with your kids as much as you can during this time. Um, I know that's not the first time anybody's heard that probably, but if it's the 50th time, it's not enough, because it's hard right now. And I think what we have to understand is for adults, this is hard. For adults, we're not totally clear on what the future looks like. We're not sure what normal is going to look like in 6 months. We're not sure how long schools are going to, we there's so much unknown for us, and we struggle to deal with it. Now take that down to a 16-year-old or a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old. A lot of the parents that we're in community with, their kids understand that they can't do things, but they can't really understand the why behind it. They've never been in a situation before where someone else was sick, so they couldn't do something.
Mhm.
It's hard to understand for a preschooler, elementary age kid, why other people being sick means they can't have baseball. Why other people being sick means they can't go to school, why they can't have a birthday party, all that kind of stuff. And so I think we have to understand that our kids are grieving
Yeah.
right now, that they really are grieving a loss. I especially feel for the seniors. That's been some of the hardest conversations to have, is with some of our seniors who prom's not going to happen. Graduation's not going to happen, at least not in the way they planned for it to happen. These last few months of being in classes with their friends aren't going to happen. They're a few months away from their life changing drastically already, because they're leaving home, they're moving out, they're moving away to school, and they had this idea in their mind of how they were going to spend those last months with their friends, and now all that's had a wrench thrown in it big time. So
Yeah.
I think it's easy. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Now I have a senior in high school, and he, I was thinking about that, what you said. He one day he was in school, the next day they stopped, and he'll never see some people in that school ever again. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
just now different. And I know it's that way with people going in from middle school to high school and elementary school to middle school. There's people they won't see, and they won't step foot back in the schools again, and it's challenging.
Yeah, and um, I think it's easy as adults to skip a step and immediately try to move our kids towards, hey, there's going to be bigger stuff that comes in life. Missing a graduation is not the end of the world. You're going to have a college graduation later, or missing prom's not that big a deal. You're going to have a wedding one day, and that you'll forget about prom. It's not wrong to try and help our kids gain a longer term and especially an eternal perspective on it. That's what we should be doing, but we can't skip the first step of grieving with them, and helping to legitimize their pain and their sense of loss. A lot of times we as adults make the mistake of thinking, well, that's a big deal when you're 12, but it's not a big deal when you're 40. So, get over it. And we forget that, no, when I was 12, if I had to miss a baseball season, that was the end of my world.
Mm-hmm.
That was it for me. I was talking to our family team this morning, and we were talking about some of the kids, and it was like, I never got grounded for 2 full months. And that's basically what these kids are feeling like. And they didn't even do anything wrong. They didn't deserve it. And they're grounded for 2 months.
Yeah.
And so there is this feeling of loss. And I think it's important that we're vulnerable with our kids, and we're telling them that we're hurting too, that we feel it too, that we understand. And then moving on to the next step of helping them see the bigger picture and start looking forward to the things that are in front of them, not just the things that they're missing out behind them. But it's important to walk through that progression with them instead of just saying, oh, it's no big deal, get over it, just wait till you have a mortgage to pay and a family to pay. Yeah, that stuff is bigger and more important, but not when you're 14.
Yeah. Wow. So if you were to kind of think through a scripture or something like that maybe you would love for people to kind of think about during this season of global pandemic, what would be scripture that maybe has resonated with you during this time?
Yeah, we've been doing some extra content at church just because we figured people are home and bored, so we might as well talk at them some more. And one that came up the other day was John 5:17, and Jesus was talking to some Jewish leaders, and they were upset with him for working on the Sabbath. Essentially, they were saying, you can't be healing people on the Sabbath. That's a day of rest. And Jesus' response to them, I love, and again, his context was the Sabbath, but I think it applies perfectly right now as well. He says, my Father is always working, and so am I. And I think it'd be really easy to think right now that maybe God's asleep at the wheel a little bit, because we look around and there's so much brokenness and there's so much uncertainty, and it'd be easy to think, well, maybe God just decided to take April off this year. And yet Jesus is right there telling us, my Father is always working, and so am I. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, and I think it just comes through as true over and over again, is Genesis 50:20. And it's, even what Satan meant for evil, God used for good in the saving of lives. There's a lot of things around us happening right now that could be evil. There's people out of work. There's people not sure, what's coming next for their jobs. There's people not sure what's coming next for school, or there's just so many things that we could look at as evil. Yeah. And yet we have a God whose victory is so overwhelming and so complete that even the devices that Satan thinks are going to bring about, our ruin and our destruction, God says, you know what? No, I can turn that into something good.
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about even the idea of definition of good. That can be a challenging thing because in our minds, sometimes we think good means, no more pandemic, no more sickness, no more this, and that's not necessarily what he was saying in that verse.
Yeah, I want, if it were up to me, good would mean happy, healthy, comfortable, rich, all that kind of stuff. Like that's good. And yet God's view seems to be very different. God's view of good is much more eternal. My view of good is 5 minutes from now. And so I think Like we just talked about, I think it is really important to, and Kevin, this is something that you, repeated over and over again when you were teaching here, is a biblical perspective goes a long, long way, and an eternal perspective goes a long, long way, because when we zoom in on the 6 weeks of quarantine, it gets overwhelming. It really does. And yet when we zoom out to the full picture of this year, 5 years, it gets a little bit better. But then when we zoom out to eternity and start thinking, you know what? I have a secure place in heaven with the creator of the universe. It's like, okay, I can get through a Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, there's a lot for us to think about. And I know that, we've heard phrase, I've heard it seen all over internet, talking about how, we're all kind of in the same storm. And there's a global pandemic storm happening, but man, we're in different places in that storm, different boats in that storm, different places. There's some that feel like they're sinking, and others that maybe they're coasting along and they feel okay. But in the sense of it, man, there's just a lot going on, and everybody's life is different because of this. And it's just different. Some ways are we just are desperate for something. And I know one of my prayers have been that people would look to God, reach out to him in this season, in that. But looking at the idea of the whole concept of God, what does good look like for me? And I think you earlier talking, I love the phrase you used, was that it feels like maybe God might hit the snooze button during this time. And it feels like that sometimes. God, where are you? So, for us to just continue to seek him, to try to figure out what God is doing in this season, is something that can keep us going. But at the same time, it's a different world, very much.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, thanks for connecting, and looking forward to chatting with you some more and talking with you more. But just thanks for jumping in with us today.
Yeah, of course. Love you, and the rest of the family. Miss you guys, and I'm glad you're well on the path to recovery.
Yeah, very thankful for that too.